So my spiritual journey really began when I was around 16 years old. I became involved in energy work, and the purpose of that was self-reform, self-healing, self-transformation. That was really my goal. And also inner discovery, inner exploration. So I took on that practice for about 3 or 4 years, and at the age of 20, I had an explosive spiritual awakening, is the best way that I can describe it. It was an experience of consciousness, it was an experience of love, it was something that took me completely outside of everything that I knew at that point in my life. But my experience is not unique to me. Many people around the world are having these types of experiences. In fact, a Pew study shows that in 1962, if you had asked the average American if they had had a mystical experience, a religious or mystical experience, only 22% would have answered yes. Now you fast forward to 2009, and 48% of individuals are answering yes. They have had a mystical or religious experience. In our view, this is happening because spiritual awakening, spiritual experience is an evolutionary phenomenon. This is something that's built into our genetics. In other words, we feel the human race is evolving toward a more spiritual species. So it would make sense to see this kind of data. We feel that these experiences, all spiritual experiences, are brought on by a single biological mechanism that we call Kundalini. Now, Kundalini, defined as a biological mechanism in the body that is responsible for all spiritual experience, including enlightenment. It's also responsible for genius and some forms of insanity. And so I just want to elaborate on that and talk a little bit about Kundalini itself. So Kundalini comes from the Sanskrit word for coiled up. There's also some other connotations to the root words, including being at the base or like a bowl. In other words, the floor of the abdomen. And Kundalini is very important to our model of research in terms of spiritual experience. So let's just jump into that really quick. In 2014, late 2014, we launched a survey that we call the Kundalini Profile Survey, or Spiritual Profile Survey. This is a 268, very extensive 5-point Likert question survey with a number of different categories, including spiritual and mystical experiences, pranic experiences or energy experiences, talents, physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, with a focus on psychological growth. So how are these experiences evolving or changing an individual? This is a brief, just some brief descriptive statistics just to show who have been taking our survey. You can see that a little bit more females than males. We've even had an intersex participant take the survey. And the age distribution is pretty wide. So we've got people very young, teenagers, all the way up to the more mature individuals, and all the way through. So we took all this data, and by the way, about 500 participants have taken the survey. And one of the questions, the research questions that we were intending on answering as a part of this survey has to do with an experience that all of us have heard about, but it's very difficult to define, as we'll see in a moment, called enlightenment or higher consciousness. So I would just want to do an exercise real quick, and this is going to require a buddy system here. So if you want to find somebody that's sitting next to you, what I want everybody to do is just spend I'm going to give everybody a minute for the exercise, so we're going to do it real quick. But we're going to spend a minute here, and what I want you to do first is come up with your own brief definition of enlightenment. What do you feel enlightenment actually is? All right, so this exercise involves sharing. So what I want you to do is, you can decide who goes first, but I want you each to share your definition of enlightenment with each other. So go right on ahead. You guys have 1 minute to share. You can talk about it briefly afterwards, so go right on ahead. Now think about what your partner told you, what enlightenment is, and think about your definition for a moment. And what I want people to do is raise your hands if the definition of enlightenment that your partner gave you was exact to yours. I mean, similar wording, similar everything. Raise your hand if it was exact. Okay, I see exactly 0 hands raised in the room. Okay, let's go to the second level here. How many people's definition of enlightenment was pretty close, but just slightly off? Pretty close, but slightly off. Okay, I see 1 person raising their hand. That's pretty good. Okay, now how many people's definition of enlightenment was completely different from their partners? I should see everybody's hands going up. That doesn't mean that anybody is right or wrong. It means, it implies where we're at in our understanding of enlightenment. So I want to give you some research findings from our survey that digs a little bit deeper into this phenomenon. So we looked at the survey data from the previous survey I mentioned, and we employed just about every technique imaginable to comb through the data. We did factor analysis, we did principal components analysis, principal factor analysis, we did everything you can imagine, descriptive statistics, manually looking at the data, reading through the open text fields with numerous volunteers. And at the end of the day, we came up with our own clinical definition of enlightenment. And I'll share with you what that is. So our definition of enlightenment is a state of consciousness whereby there is a direct perception of consciousness as an objective reality. Now that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows, so I'll kind of go into what that means from somebody who's had this type of experience. What it means is that normally consciousness is completely transparent to us. We have no awareness of what consciousness is. Rather, we perceive the world through this invisible medium or invisible lens of consciousness, exactly as a lens on a microscope works. The direct perception of consciousness means that now the table is turned, the roles are reversed. Mind, intelligence, consciousness, life becomes the primary reality, and the universe that we see around us becomes like a thin film or a thin bubble floating on an ocean of consciousness. One of the other characteristics is that there is an attainment of a type of bliss not possible to achieve otherwise. An activation of, and we feel, based on the data we've collected, that there is some sort of activation of a dormant activity of the central nervous system and reproductive systems. A lot of activity in the nerves, a lot of activity up the spine, a lot of activity in the reproductive areas that changes drastically when someone has this experience. And according to our model, we are putting forth this bold idea that this form of consciousness, this higher consciousness, is actually the form of consciousness possessed by the founders of all great religions. It is the form of consciousness of the future human developing on this planet. And the name that we've given this species, this emergent human species, is Homo cosmogenesis, which means one in whom the universe is born. So one of the interesting characteristics here, and what you're looking at is a correlations matrix for you statisticians out there. All of these correlations here were different experiences that we extracted from the survey. And one interesting finding is that when we normally talk about Kundalini or spiritual awakening, we talk about light, we talk about sensations of energy. But what we actually found was that a spiritual rebirth, a spiritual healing or transformation was actually much more highly correlated with this experience of higher consciousness and with Kundalini awakenings. So in other words, these energy sensations are a part of the phenomenon, but the real goal is healing, personal healing, deep personal healing and transformation that may give rise to these experiences. So that's one of the things we're looking at. Also, as a result of the research, we developed a probabilistic model using something called latent class analysis. And what this allows us to do is to categorize you based on your survey response into one of a number of categories. So here, this is a 4-class model, and depending on your responses, you'll drop into one of these buckets. You can see over here in class 4, these high bars kind of further away from us indicate that these individuals have indicated a very strong experience of key indicators, key variables associated with higher consciousness. So in other words, this is a classification system, and the goal of having a classification system like this in the first place is to help individuals move from, let's say, class 1 to a higher class of experience in terms of higher consciousness. So where does Kundalini fit into the big picture? I've mentioned Kundalini. I've mentioned to you that according to our model, it's this biological mechanism in the body. Kundalini, we feel the Kundalini biological mechanism is at the root or the core of all spiritual experience. It gives rise to higher consciousness which is a subset of all spiritual experiences. So now I wanted to introduce to you our effort to explore and understand Kundalini in more detail. We call this the Kundalini Experimental Project. The goal of the project is to voluntarily awaken Kundalini in our participants. We're using randomized controlled trials to test certain theories that we've developed about Kundalini. This is the important part here, is that we're conducting experiments on different groups and then measuring the responses from these groups. Phase 1, so we've spent a lot of time doing research. It just launched just a few days ago, our phase 1 of the project, where we're actually voluntarily now awakening Kundalini. It's taken us 2 years to get to the point where we feel comfortable and confident in prescribing certain techniques and recommendations to individuals and being able to identify problems and issues as they're happening. So as part of this project, there is a support network of individuals who are extremely critical and central to the project, who help individuals along as we conduct these experiments. And I think the most exciting part of this is that it's been deployed as a free mobile application that's currently in closed beta. And for the non-software people out there, that just means that we're testing it with a group. We haven't announced it to the public as of yet, but we're scheduling a public release for later this year, at which point you'll be able to download it to a mobile device, Apple or Android, and potentially access it from your PC. So I just want everybody to relax and breathe naturally. And as you're breathing, just focus on ever so slightly elongating the duration of your breath. Relaxation is key here, so we just want to walk through that. What I want everybody to do first is establish a connection with the earth. I want you to do that through your legs, as your feet are firmly planted on the earth. Build up an energetic connection with the earth itself that rises up your body through the legs, through the hips, into the torso, and slowly climbs its way up the body until you feel magnetized with your mother, the earth. As you do that, I want you to feel that connection strengthen into a feeling of presence, here, now. An awareness of the body, an awareness of breath, and just sit with that for a moment before we continue any further. As you maintain this feeling of groundedness, imagine that you're surrounded by a pure white light that comes from this connection with the earth. Feel this white light emanating from your core self, your true self, your highest self, manifesting itself and grounding down as physical creation onto the earth, with the earth, and through the earth. As this light continues to travel downward through the higher levels of creation, it is born into this world, each of us in the same way, as a tiny baby, completely helpless, only able to survive through the love of the Creator, through the motherly love that was provided to each of us when we were very young. Feel this sense of connection, of helplessness, of surrender, of humility to the love that you are provided, that allows you to survive on this planet moment to moment. that love, that humility is still here with each of us, is your connection to the Mother, to the Divine Mother. She is the one in each of us that brings us life, that brings us breath, that makes our heart beat, that provides us the warmth of our bodies. Sit in gratitude of that life, of that connection to the Mother. Now what I want each of you to do is to now generate that love, amplify, magnify that feeling of love for your body, your mind, your spiritual awareness. Expand that love to encompass every level of your being. Feel that love now expand from your heart center to grow slowly, encompassing the space around you, the chairs and the people around you, enveloping this whole room. And now continuing to expand to the farthest reaches of creation. This love fills every space in this universe. This love is a form of intelligence, of life. The most basic form of intelligence in life is this love. As you fill this space, come back down. Feel the love now beginning to contract, beginning to return back to its seat in the heart center. And as you do so, feel this love infused with compassion for all of those around you, for the planet, for all life. And as you infuse this love with compassion, acknowledge the shared intent that we all have to embody this love in our research, in our education, in our practice, in our personal lives, in everything that we do. The shared intention for love, compassion, and healing. Go ahead and slowly open your eyes as soon as you're ready. Thank you. Thank all of you. When we talk about Kundalini, we are simultaneously talking about healing. We are simultaneously talking about personal transformation. And it's no wonder that the modern symbol for our medical establishment, our healing establishments, comes from Kundalini symbology, the central channel surrounded by two intertwining serpents. I mean, it's got it all right there. That's something that makes this institution special. All of you who are into practice, makes you extremely important to the welfare of this world. So that's the importance of Kundalini. I hope you all had at least a decent overview of what this concept means. So now I wanted to change the pace a little bit. I wanted to talk about what are the next steps to bring this level of healing to the world. And as we talk about this, we're going to go back to this Kundalini experimental project. And these are the three things that I'm most excited about when we talk about the Kundalini experimental project. The first thing is that it's crowdsourced. What this means is that it has no boundaries, it has no borders, it has no limitations. The entire world, in fact, is invited to participate in this global project, and that's what we mean by crowdsourced. Also, the volunteers, the people contributing to this movement, this cause, this research project, are all coming from every corner of the globe imaginable and assisting to bring this new understanding about. The other part, being a technical person myself, that I'm most excited about is that it's open source. What this means is that all of the research that we're doing, the algorithms, the analysis, the understanding, is all made freely available to the public. There is nothing that we hide, nothing that we don't want to provide other researchers. And the main purpose of it being open source, these two projects in particular, Kundalini Discover and Kundalini Explore, these projects are designed to give researchers around the world access to the methods and techniques and analysis that we're using for this project. And the last part is that it's scientific research, which I'm sure makes everybody here very excited. We are using as many scientific controls and as much rigor as we can to conduct this experiment. I mentioned earlier that we're using randomized controlled trials, which is extremely important in this type of work. And just a quick plug here about the mobile application. So the mobile application is really going to provide three things that we feel are critical to the progress of the Kundalini experimental project. One is that it allows you to connect with a community of participants, your own practice group. The other part is that it allows you to track and monitor your activities. So this is really important because as we live our lives, we're doing different things, we're meeting different people, we're doing different behaviors day to day, and we want to begin to provide people some insight into how their behaviors, how their, let's say, their spiritual practice or other things that they're doing in their life affect their progress along the way. So this is a way for not only people to track their activities, but for us to gather important research data on what is exactly happening when people do particular practices. What effects are we seeing? There's also surveys embedded in this, and this has to do with the last point here, which is access to research and insights. So as part of this app, what we're trying to do is expose our research as plainly and as understandable as we possibly can, and also provide insights and recommendations based on the research that we're conducting. And this is all part of the experiment. So why are we doing all of this? Why is the Kundalini experimental project important? Well, the reason that we've chosen to research Kundalini separate from any other phenomenon that's out there is because we feel that because it is inherently and intensely biological, that this particular phenomenon offers science the best chance at capturing empirical data and empirical evidence of the spiritual transformation that we all know is happening, that we all feel, that we all have integrated and taken on as part of our lives. And we feel that by continuing this research, by continuing to empirically demonstrate the truths of spiritual traditions all around the world, that we can, over time, learn to reconstruct, reposition all of the systems of humankind to be in more harmony with this biological mechanism, whether it be our political systems, our economic systems, our religions, our sciences, our educational systems, even sustainability and environment. How do we structure all of these systems in such a way so that they are in tune, in concert with this biological, spiritual evolution that is happening all around the world? We are evolving, and we are evolving together. And despite the crime, wars, political unrest, and turmoil on the planet, humankind has a divine destiny on this globe. This is a divine destiny that we all share. But the key to achieving this destiny is where it has always been, within ourselves. Thank you.